How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the old H22 transmission, so let's roll the intro and get into it. So, just got back from vacation last week, had an amazing road trip with the 4Runner through the mountains, and we're back now. Time to start getting into car stuff, so here's what we want to do today. So the original plan was to get all the sandblasting and priming done in the wheel wells and the engine bay, but I ran into a little bit of a problem with this dinky little sandblaster here. So I would fill it up with blast media, I would start blasting, it would last about 10 seconds, and then I would have to spend about 5 minutes filling it up with media again. So it was not very productive. I was getting very frustrated. I got like this bit here blasted a little bit, and it took me almost half an hour to do all this little stuff. So I set that aside and I ordered a new sandblaster. It's got a 10-gallon hopper on it, and it should be here this week. So in the meantime, I still want to stay productive. So I do need to take the transmission off the old H22, because that's what I'm going to be using. This is the one that has the WaveTrack LSD in it. So this one's got to come off, it's got to get cleaned up, and then we will be using this one on this engine. So we got to get it wheeled through here into a workable space, get it removed off of there, and see what we're dealing with. It's going to require a lot of cleaning, so let's get to it. All right, guys, so I got the engine hoist hooked up and I put a little bit of tension on it, just enough to lift it up off the roller here. And I should have enough room to work now. So I'm just gonna start removing components. As you can see, this thing is really dirty, so it's gonna need a really good clean. And I'll probably end up having to take a wire wheel to it because I will be painting this the same black as I did the engine. So yeah, let's just start tearing this apart and get to work. All right, guys, well, I had a bit of an issue trying to get the engine to balance. All I did is I wrapped a chain around here and attached it here so it can't tilt back anymore. And then I also put some 2x6s down there for the engine to sit on. Put a block under here for the oil pan to sit on so that the flywheel is up off the ground. So I think this is good. We can put it back into storage, and now we can get to work on the transmission. So as you can see, the engine had a leak coming from somewhere, and this thing is filthy. All right, so I got some of the parts stripped off the transmission. I just have them laid out here. This is the shifter cable bracket, which I'll have to reuse. Intermediate shaft is gonna need to be cleaned up, but I'm not sure if I need this clutch line. I'm probably gonna be going with a braided set anyway, so I may not need this. and I will be getting a new sleeve cylinder, so there's no need for that. So I will be cleaning a little bit of this stuff up. These are brackets for lifting the engine out of the car, which I don't think I'm gonna need, so I'll probably leave those out. But for the time being, I don't really have any engine degreaser on hand right now, so I've just kind of stolen some solvent out of my solvent tank here, and I'm just gonna let it soak on here for a little bit. See if we can break up some of this grease and oil and dirt and gravel. It's pretty filthy on here, so hopefully I can let that sit on there for a little bit. It'll start to break it up. Then I'll take a brush and start cleaning some of it off. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm gonna make do with what I have, but I will be picking up some engine degreaser, and then we'll see. I might have to get some brake clean and some other things yet, but this is gonna be a bit of a process because it's caked on there pretty bad. So I'm gonna take some time and get this nice and clean, and then we're gonna get it prepped for paint. All right guys, it's a new day today. Here's where we're at with the transmission. So I plugged up the holes so I don't get any moisture or debris or anything inside the transmission. And I started working on it with a wire wheel, and I also used some solvent because that's all I had on hand. But it seemed to do okay in the cleaner areas. In this area here where there's a lot of buildup, not so much. So I was able to get in here a little bit with the wire brush, and it cleaned it up a little bit, but I still think it needs to be a lot cleaner. So today I picked up some engine degreaser. So we're gonna give this stuff a try. This is just a spray on and then you rinse it off. So we'll see if it can break up some of that really heavy oil on there. And I did grab some brake clean as well, so we can use that. Hopefully we can get this thing clean enough where it's to the point where we can actually paint it and the paint's gonna stick. So that's the goal for today, is to at least get this degreaser on there and at least make some progress on it. So using this stuff is pretty straightforward. It says spray it on, let it sit for about 15 minutes, and then rinse it off. I may need to brush it if it's not loosening up these really heavy deposits, but yeah, let's get to spraying it on and we'll see what happens. All right guys, well after about an hour of work, this is how we're looking. So actually not too bad. I only used maybe about a quarter of that can of engine degreaser, and then I cleaned it up with a spray bottle full of water, and then I finished up with an entire can of brake clean, and that kind of dried it off and got rid of any other residual oil off of it. So it actually worked pretty good. At least most of the oil deposits are off of it, and I should be able to clean up the rest of it with a wire brush. All right guys, so let's skip ahead a little bit here. As you can see, I got the transmission tipped on end now. I got my drill with the wire wheel on it, and it actually cleaned it up pretty good. I want to redo all the RTV, so I'm gonna have to split some of these pieces apart and redo the seal. I noticed that I had a pretty bad oil leak. I couldn't really tell exactly where it was coming from, but it was in this general area here. There was a lot of oil over in this area. So my guess is that it was probably from this axle seal, and it would drip onto the axle, and as it would spin, then it would kind of shoot the oil everywhere. But I don't want to take any chances. I don't want to end up painting this thing and then have it leaking everywhere again and have to risk taking it apart. Once it's painted, trying to take it apart could scratch the paint pretty bad. So yeah, that's kind of my next plan. I'm gonna get some of these pieces off of here. I'll try and remove the bell housing from the transmission case. Alright guys, so I got all the bolts removed around the case, and it's been a while since we've had this transmission apart, so I had to refer to some OG Boosted Boys videos, and I think I figured out how to do it again. So next thing I'm going to do is remove this piece here. So you have to take this bolt out, and then there's also this bolt under here that I have to loosen off, and then this whole assembly should pull out. So I'm going to do that next. All right guys, now the last step before I can pry this case apart is there is a snap ring down inside this hole. So basically I'm going to take a pair of needle nose pliers and spread this apart. The gear set should fall slightly anyway, and then that snap ring will stay open. Once that happens, then we should be free and we can separate the case from the bell housing. All right, so I couldn't do it while holding the camera, but as you can see, the snap ring is now spread apart because the gear set has dropped, and then that's what keeps it apart. So now we should be able to get a pry bar and get this case separated. All right guys, so now that I got this apart, I spent a bit of time with a razor blade and some brake clean, got all the old gasket RTV removed, so it's basically ready to be put back together. So what I want to do is I want to paint it before I put it back together, because I am going to be using my Downstar dress-up bolts to put the case onto the bell housing, and I don't want to seal it and then paint it and then risk getting paint all over my dress-up bolts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip the case back on here without sealing it, and then I should be able to paint everything. Then I can disassemble it without prying on anything, because that was what I was scared of. I didn't want to pry on fresh paint. So once everything's painted and cured, then we can take the case back off, seal it up, and then we can bolt it up properly. So that's what I'm going to try to do now, is put the case back on here. And I know the last time me and Tim had this apart, we had a heck of a time getting it back together. So I'm hoping it goes a bit easier this time, since I haven't disassembled anything on this part of it. The last time we had it apart, we installed the LSD in here, so we had to take everything apart, and I think that's why we had an issue getting it to line up. But I'm going to try putting this case back on here. Hopefully it goes well. All right guys, so I got the case put onto the bell housing as far as I can go, and this is what I was talking about. So every time we would try to put this back together, this is about as far as we could get, and it's not the dowels because they're not even making contact yet. So I think there's something up top here that doesn't quite line up. All right guys, either I figured it out or I got really lucky. So I tried about 3 or 4 more times and we got it seated. So basically what I think the problem was one of these push rods in here wasn't lining up in the case. So all I did was I kind of wiggled this middle one here and then it dropped. So we're good. We are now seated. So now I think I can do a final cleaning of this thing and we can get some paint on it. Now my plan for this was to use the same engine paint that I used on the H22 I got over there. So I used a high heat engine primer and then a high heat engine paint. And then once it goes through its heat cycles, it will heat cure, and that's where it gets its strength from. When I went to get paint, they were sold out of primer, so none of it would work to go direct to metal. So what I ended up doing is I picked up some farm paint. This is going to be temporary. My long-term plan, because I have a spare transmission, is to disassemble the spare transmission fully and get everything powder coated. But in the meantime, I want to run this transmission as it is, so I'm going to use some farm paint. Now, if you guys remember, we ended up painting our CRX with agricultural paint, this exact stuff, and it has held up phenomenally. We do dirt racing with that car. It has hit a lot of debris and a lot of cones, and there's like not a scratch on it. So I think it's going to be durable enough, at least until I get the other trans apart and powder coated. Then we can swap everything over to that casing. But for now, we're going to spray this with some farm paint. It'll look good at least for one season, I think. And if not, it's no big deal because it's going to look good in the long run. All right, guys, so my phone ended up dying on me, so I had to charge it while I prepped it. But I got everything taped off and put in all the bolts so that the threads won't get any paint in them. But I think I'm pretty well ready to start laying some paint. I had to use some packing tape on here because for some reason my painter's tape wouldn't stick. I used brake clean and all kinds of degreaser to try and get this surface nice and clean, but nothing wanted to stick to it except this. So that's what I'm using. But yeah, I got it as clean as I can possibly get it. So I'm gonna get my mask on, my gloves on, and just sand it. So I'll set you up on the tripod. Let's get this thing painted. All right guys, it's a new day today. Transmission's been drying for about 12 hours now. So I let it dry overnight, and now I want to take it back apart so we can get everything sealed. So it's looking pretty fresh. There's a few areas where I'm gonna have to touch up yet, but I can do that once it's put back together. So I'm just gonna start carefully removing all the bolts that I installed before and getting this case removed off the bell housing. Then I can do one final clean of the mating surface, get some sealer on there, and then we can put this thing back together, hopefully for the last time. All right guys, so I got it all clean. I'm gonna be using this black RTV. I know we're supposed to use gray for this kind of stuff, but the store was sold out of that too. So I gotta make do with whatever they had. So it was either blue or black. I chose the black. All right guys, so I got all the downstar bolts installed, everything's torqued down, and the excess silicone is cleaned up. So this is looking real nice. I am very happy with that. So all that's left to do now is kind of put everything else back together. I will need to put some sealant on this cap back here. And then I do need to do some sealant around here as well when I put this cover back on. So I'm gonna do that right now, put everything back together. The one thing I had to do was get the snap ring back in place in here. So all I did is I spread it apart again with needle nose pliers, and then that got it partially over the piece inside there. And then to get it up the rest of the way, I just kind of stuck a flathead screwdriver inside here. I was able to pry up on the gear set very gently, and that popped it back up into place, and now the snap ring is around it. So we're all good to go in there. That's a step you don't want to forget. So now I'm just going to get to putting all this back together. We should be done real soon. All right guys, well, for the most part, the transmission is now done. I do need to let it cure for a little bit longer yet, since it's only been about 14 hours that it's been sitting here drying. But I'm gonna be interested to see how durable it is, considering I didn't do a whole lot of prep to the transmission. I cleaned it up as best I could, but it definitely wasn't perfect. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how well this paint holds up. All that's really left to do on it now is get some new axle seals. And then there's a couple sensors I want to replace, which are on order. They're currently on back order from Honda. So we're probably talking about the end of September, maybe into October, we'll be getting those sensors in. So then I can install those. But yeah, for the most part, transmission is done. Now I did end up receiving my sandblaster in the mail yesterday. So on the next video, we're gonna be putting this thing together and putting it to the test. Hey guys, I'm pretty stoked about this thing. I'm interested to see how well it's gonna hold up, considering it is an eBay product that was made in China, but it'll be fun to put it together and see how it works. So yeah guys, if you like the video, definitely give it a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and drop a comment below, because we love to hear feedback from you guys. We'll see you next time.